Hello there guys, RMP792 here. Sorry this is a day late. The short version is I did record one yesterday. As requested by somebody in the comments of the last one, I talked about the Elder Scrolls series for about 20 minutes. And then my camera decided it wanted to have a bit of a hissy fit and it lost all the footage. And that's always really annoying. Trying to redo it immediately afterwards is just tedious. So what I'm going to do is talk about something different today. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the Dead Space games. And then either later in the week or possibly just next Monday, I'll talk about the Elder Scrolls series then. Okay? Right, so, Dead Space. The reason I want to talk about this is pretty simple. I just finished Dead Space 3, or I finished it yesterday. I hadn't played it before, but I happened to be in Durham, and there's a old video game store there, and it was a case of, well, I can get all 3 Dead Space games for about £7. Yeah, that seems worth it. So ended up picking up all 3 and worked my way through the trilogy. And I've talked about Dead Space before, just not on this channel. There was a brief period at university where I actually ended up writing for a sort of film and game and pop culture website kind of thing. Don't think that exists anymore. Wasn't exactly a well-written article because obviously didn't have much experience writing and I'm never confident in what I write anyway. But my comment at the time was I'd basically played Dead Space 1 and 2 because it was the run-up to Halloween, and I always like to do something nominally horror-based around Halloween. The main problem is I'm actually very, very difficult to scare in that regard. Because I've never yet played a game that's genuinely scary. I've played things that make me jump, but jump isn't scared. And Dead Space is a prime example of that, because there are lots of moments in Dead Space and Dead Space 2, and not really Dead Space 3, that make you go, whoa, to a limited extent. There's almost nothing that is existential, oh god, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And the main reason for that is you have weapons. Yeah. Now, I'm fully aware there are plenty of horror games out there that basically don't let you have any weapons at all, and you're just kind of sneaking through, and there's no possible way you can defend yourself effectively. And that, to me, just doesn't appeal. The prime example of that would be something like Alien Isolation, where there's only one xenomorph, but it's always coming for you, and it's always going to get you, and there's basically bugger all you can do about it, except maybe drive it off briefly with a flamethrower. Or try and distract it and sneak around. That, to me, isn't scary. That's just cheap. So it's the classic problem of how do you balance, fear of something coming for you with actual ability to fight it fight it sanely in a way that doesn't just feel dirt cheap. Dead Space does not balance it. It swings way more towards the actiony side, which is fine. It's a horror action game, for lack of a better turn of phrase. For those of you not aware, the plot of Dead Space, or the original Dead Space, is basically you are Isaac Clarke, who is of course named after 2 very famous science fiction authors, Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. And you have been sent to investigate a loss of contact with the ship, the USS. No, is it the USS? Can't remember. It's some prefix. USG? Doesn't matter. You're after the Ishimura, which is a sort of giant kilometre-long planet cracker ship, which does pretty much what it says on the tin. It basically breaks open planets to get at the gooey centre. Think the thing from Independence Day Resurgence, but less terrible. The Ishimura is basically a giant mining ship, to all intents and purposes. And Isaac and his team are basically engineers. They're it's a 3-person team. And you toddle along to the Ishimura and find, well, it's all gone a bit creepy, and the walls seem to be covered in a mysterious red substance. And from there it's classic sort of haunted ship tropes to all intents and purposes. And you eventually find out that the ship has been basically taken over by these creatures known as necromorphs, which basically take dead tissue and mutate it into giant monsters with blades for hands and things like that, which is fun. So you have to basically, and of course the ship you arrived on gets broken, so you're stuck there. So you basically have to try and make your way through the ship and survive and try and find Isaac's missing fiance, who was the medical officer on board the Ishimura. And of course everybody gets killed, and it does not go well for anybody involved. And you eventually discover the source of the this mysterious necromorph outbreak is an alien artifact taken from the surface of the planet that they were in orbit of. A device called a marker. And as to what markers actually are, having played all 3 games, I'm still not entirely sure. Dead Space 3 kind of promises it's going to answer more questions and then kind of doesn't. So, you eventually manage to get the hell off the Ishimura and then, you survive. Nobody else does. Spoilers. And then in Dead Space 2, you start off at the most sensible place for a video game protagonist, a loony bin. You're basically on a station in orbit of Saturn, Titan station, and yes, you're in a mental asylum. And then, like 2 minutes into the game, a guy basically gets transformed into a necromorph in front of you because, of course, they've basically used the knowledge from your brain from getting too close to the marker to build another one, because that's not a really stupid idea. So you end up having to fight your way through Titan Station, and 2 is probably the best of the series because it remembers that it's supposed to be a horror game, while also tightening up the gameplay a lot, adding in some good new additions, like the fact that zero gravity stops being a thing where you have to sort of push off and leap to another thing, and you actually get, to all intents and purposes, a jetpack. It only works at zero gravity, but it does actually let you maneuver around in zero gravity quite comfortably, which is really good. And it significantly lessens some of the cheap stuff, because there are moments in Dead Space that will just be cheap ways to kill you. I'm talking especially about the little swarmy buggers who are about this big, which makes them bloody difficult to hit with anything. I basically buy the flamethrower exclusively to kill those things. And if they swarm you, you will die because you can't hammer the A button fast enough to kill them all before they kill you, basically. Which is just frustrating. So I'm glad they lessened that significantly in 2. 2 also has the advantage of some genuinely interesting side characters. And it also gives Isaac a voice. Because in the first game, he's a silent protagonist, apart from when he screams horribly when he gets killed. And boy, does Isaac Clarke get killed in some fairly horrible ways. He's not terribly attached to his limbs, is poor Isaac. They're constantly getting pulled off and sliced off, and he's constantly getting bisected and decapitated. And he dies a lot of weird ways, does our Mr. Clarke. But, so they actually got the same guy who did all his various screams in the first one back to play him as a voiced character in the second one. And that was definitely the right call, I think, because, Isaac as a character he's average. He's basically a fairly generic science fiction, horror-y protagonist, but it works for the most part. You've also got Stross in the second one, who is completely bonkers. He's also been exposed to a marker, and it's driven him completely doolally. And you've got Ellie, who's basically a pilot who you happen across, who you end up sort of having to work with in order to survive, and there's a bit of a friendship formed there, and the third game insists that they were a couple, which no. Here's the thing, even when she comes back for him at the end of the second one, I didn't see that as romantic. I saw that as, they've been through enough together at that point that, she doesn't want to see him die pointlessly. So, I appreciate a lot of people are going to say, oh, but, harsh events like that tend to bring people together. Yeah, not necessarily. But anyway, so yeah, 2 is a pretty damn solid game. Um, and now, having played 3 for the first time, I do certainly get some of the complaints. 3 has basically said, horror, what's that? And apart from the fact that the necromorphs are still, genuinely creepy, the creature designs in Dead Space has actually been really good all the way through. The design of the necromorphs themselves are just human enough to be, really, really creepy, which definitely works. Right down to the fact that the most effective way to kill necromorphs is not, headshots, because they don't need heads. They're basically, necrotized flesh. The best way to take them down is to take off all their limbs, which is a pretty much unique. I don't remember it being in any other game that I've played. So capping limbs off them is pretty satisfying to do. So Dead Space 3 has basically ditched most of the horror elements. That at no point will one pretend to be dead and then suddenly leap up and try and get you, which, again, that's not scary to me. Certainly in the first couple of games, it got to the point where I'd basically walk into a room. Body, pulse rifle, bang, bang, bang. Okay, we're good. Simple precautionary measures you can take to avoid any of the jump scares if you know what you're doing. But yeah, 3 basically ditches that element entirely, and basically has Isaac getting recruited by a small military group to go off and find what is hopefully the homeworld of the markers, because they think they might be able to destroy them. Meanwhile, you've got this little whack job religious group called the Unitologists, who have been mentioned throughout. It's not like they pulled this out of the air. But the Unitologists basically worship the markers because they believe that they're heralding the next stage of human evolution. Some bollocks. Let's face it, when your religious cult leader is played by Simon Templeman and even he can't make him that interesting, yeah, the religious cult thing's kind of a damn squib. Which does mean that you end up with a bit more standard third-person shooter stuff. There's a bit of cover shooting against human enemies rather than just fighting necromorphs, which, in theory, it adds some variety, but honestly, it's not that great. But the one thing that Dead Space 3 does better than the other games is the weapon crafting, which really gets across the idea that Isaac Clarke is supposed to be an engineer. So you can basically cobble together bits and stuff and turn them into weapons. Because even the most basic weapon in Dead Space, the plasma cutter, isn't supposed to be a gun, even though it works exactly like one. It is meant to be an engineer's cutting tool, which is why Isaac uses it. And yeah, it's a good idea. It would be nice if it played slightly less like a standard gun, but it works for what it is. So the weapon crafting is actually a really good system, let down by one major problem. They only give you 2 weapon slots. In the first 2 Dead Space games, you actually have 4 weapon slots mapped to the whole D-pad. And the fact that they limit you to 2 in this game is actually really annoying, because it means that you don't really want to experiment too much. Throughout the entirety of Dead Space 3, I basically had my plasma cutter on the left. On the left D-pad, which I modified slightly throughout the course of the game, but not very much. And on the other, I had a weapon that I constructed fairly early on and ended up tweaking slightly as I went through. But that weapon was basically a assault rifle with an underslung sort of concussion launcher kind of thing, which basically meant at mid-range, the enemies would close on me, put a load of bullets into them, take off their limbs. And if they got too close, pop the concussion launcher and blast them all back. And when I combined that with a module that basically applied small amounts of stasis every time I fired it, it became really, really good at holding off enemies and keeping them at range, which is very, very useful because most of the necromorphs charge up to you and try and claw your face off or stab you through with giant blade arms, and relatively few of them actually have any ranged attacks. which is which is good. But throughout the rest of the game, I was picking up components and just thinking, well, I'm not really going to use this, am I? So what's the point? So yeah, more weapon slots would have meant I would have actually bothered to experiment and try different weapon combinations, rather than just sticking with the two that I knew worked. So that was disappointing. It's a really good weapon crafting system let down by too few weapon slots to actually let you experiment. But arguably the gameplay of 3 is the best in many ways, because obviously they took what worked from 1 and 2 and tightened it up and improved on it and added a few new elements. I'm not going to talk about the fact that you can buy extra crafting resources for money, because I didn't touch it. I didn't have a problem throughout, so they seem to balance it okay. The microtransactions in full price games is still BS, but they seem to have implemented it reasonably fairly. But that's how that is. I didn't play it co-op, and you can kind of tell that they wanted you to play it co-op. Because the character Carver, the character's fine for what little you see of him in the single player campaign. But obviously, if you play it co-op, he's with you the whole time, and you actually get more into his backstory. So yeah, his attitude towards Isaac changes throughout the game a lot, even though you very rarely see him, which does kind of tell you can tell they wrote this as a co-op story and then tweaked the co-op story for if you were playing alone rather than the other way around. Which for a game series that had up to that point been entirely single player, that does seem kind of dodgy, but it still plays fine as a single player game, so no real complaints there. But yeah, overall, the best of the series is probably 2, and that's at least partially because it's got the coolest armor designs. The armor in Dead Space 1 is basically dude's got a bucket on his head. 2 has actually some really nice armor designs. I quite like the advanced suit in 2. 3 seem to be leaning away from what you would term Dead Space armor. For example, the final suit that I got in 3 was the Elite suit or something like that. But the helmet on that didn't have the sort of it didn't look like an Isaac Clarke helmet. Let's face it, it had effectively the goggles from a Sam Fisher helmet, just coloured blue rather than coloured green. So 2 definitely has the best armor designs, and I'm a sucker for good powered armor looking stuff. And I will play these games through a New Game Plus at some point, so I can actually see some of because you do unlock extra stuff when you go into New Game Plus, which I like, because I know the first one has quote unquote the military suit, and then there's more advanced versions of the various armors from 2 when you replay 2, and 3 has some extra stuff as well. So I'll be curious to play them through and see that. But ultimately, the Dead Space series, I can understand why horror fans were disappointed as it went on, because it gets more and more sort of standard third-person action game as it goes on. And the ending of 3 is kind of annoying, insofar as, and massive spoilers here, you've been to the homeworld of the Markers, or what you thought was the homeworld of the Markers. It turns out to just be a different alien species who also encountered Markers. And it turns out that Convergence basically tries to build a giant necromorph moon thing, which actually, that's a really cool idea. It's a pity they didn't do a lot more with it. And you end up sort of activating a device that's going to do something, and then Isaac sort of drifts away into a storm, and then Ellie sort of scans for them and can't find them and buggers off, and then you've got the credits, and then at the last second it's like, Ellie, and you're like, yeah, I friggin' knew he wasn't dead. Because I'm sorry, when Isaac Clarke dies, it ain't gonna be peaceful. Isaac Clarke's the kind of guy who's probably going to have to die next to a nuclear explosion or something. But as it stands, it's highly doubtful we're going to get a Dead Space 4, which is a pity because I want to know, I want to know where the markers came from. I want to actually find their actual homeworld so we can, figure out what the hell was even up with them. Because they're obviously some sort of trap, or the alien race who originally created them, something went badly wrong and it, turned them all into monsters or something. There's a lot of interesting places that you could go with this, and the fact that we're probably not going to ever find out is kind of frustrating. I freely admit that. But yeah, so ultimately, the Dead Space series is good, but with problems, and it definitely gets more action heavy as it goes on, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I enjoyed 3 for what it was, but it's definitely got problems. So yeah, I think that's about all I've got on the Dead Space series. Is there anything else I really wanted to talk about? No, I think that's about it. So, one thing I want to ask about Dead Space 3. When the hell did Ellie's eye grow back? Because she gets it poked out by Stross in 2. And, she's got an eye patch at the end of that. Or a sort of bandagey thing. And then in 3, she's just got her eye back and nobody ever mentions how. Is it a cybernetic? Have they basically managed to grow one in a lab? Because, I mean, she ain't putting her original eyeball back in. Not after it's been skewered through with a screwdriver. So when, where and how did that happen? That was something that kind of bugged me throughout the game, because it never ever frigging explained it. It's like the developers completely forgot that Ellie should have been missing an eye. But yeah. Anywho, that's I would say it's a minor complaint. It's a fairly irritating one. To be fair, you could fix it. One retexture of her character model, to actually put the eye, to give her an eye patch or something like that, and it's completely fixed because nobody has to mention it. But anywho, so yeah, that's basically all I've got on Dead Space. Sorry I didn't do that one on Elder Scrolls. I promise I will do it probably later this week. And again, if you have any thoughts, recommendations, stuff you'd like me to talk about, comment section is there. And yeah, that's basically all I've got. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future vlogs.